there, everybody, and a very happy Wednesday afternoon to you. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope your day is off to a good start or your evening is off to a good start, depending on where you happen to be in the world. So it's nighttime here in Hamburg, Germany, and I'm very excited to be spending the next maybe hour or so with you today. So if you wouldn't mind giving a wave as you jump in and just let me know that you're here with me. My name is Sarah, and today I'm excited to bring you some Christmas cards featuring one of my all-time favorite Altenew stamp and die collections. Bonjour. Oh, hi, Chris. I'm so glad that you were able to get on. I know you said you were having some internet tricks coming up earlier today, and I had them here too in Germany. So maybe it was a Europe-wide thing. So I'm glad that you're here. Bonjour. I'm super glad. So we should be joined by the lovely Lydia here in just a moment or two as well. She's going to be there. Oh, there she is. So Lydia will be keeping us posted on all of the links to the products that I'm talking about, and she'll also give a gentle reminder, I'm sure, about the $15 gift certificate that you could be in to win. So the deal is, if you are sharing the live while we are live, you'll be in for a possible $15 gift certificate to the Altenew store. And what you need to do is share the video while we're live and then post in the comments down below to let us know that you shared and tell us how you shared so that we can keep track of that. I see lots of other people jumping in. Cece, hi, glad to see you. Sorry if I've missed the other names while I was chatting away, so I just want to say a big blanket hello to everybody and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for sharing it. Oh, hi, Dreefa. Nice to see your name pop up as well. So I am very excited to share with you some of my very favorite stamps. Now, these are not brand new stamps, but these are classic in my stash of Christmas stamps. And I think a couple of you probably have this set as well. So this is the one that we're going to be playing with tonight. This is the Peace on Earth stamp set, and we also have a die collection too. But I want to point this out to you because this is one of those stamp sets that has so much use, not just for one Christmas, but you can use it year upon year. And that's what I've done. In this case, you've got a large Christmas tree ornament in kind of the shape of the planet, well, or the land masses are on here. So it is actually the world on a Christmas tree ornament, which really goes well with all of the sentiments that you have here in different languages. Now you've also got a pine bow here, which means that you can actually hang with a little hanger. You can hang your Christmas tree ornament on that branch, or you can stamp them to overlap, and we'll take a look at some ways to do that. Now the sentiments are all done in a variety of different languages. So I think you guys know the Thanks Around the World stamp set. That's another of my favorites, where it's thank you in all different languages. And this is also really similar to that. So you have Merry Christmas in everything from Dutch and Welsh to Swedish, Afrikaans, German. You have Chinese, Polish, Spanish, Russian, Korean, Ukrainian, Italian, French. I don't know if I missed anybody. Swedish, Norwegian, and of course also in English too. And the other English sentiments here, you've got a large piece on earth up here. You've also got a little one here. And you have the Merry Christmas and Joy to the World in small. And then you also have that one in large. And you also have some other sentiments here. So you could do, like, it says near or far, wishing you. And then down here you've got no matter where you are. So you could really combine a lot of those sentiments together with some of these beautiful script sentiments and create a beautiful focal element or message on your card. Now you've also got the die set as well. And for this, you've got the ornament, of course, and then you've also got the pine bow. And the nice thing about the ornament in the die cutting is that when you die cut it, it will also cut out that little hole up at the top which means that you can easily thread ribbon or maybe embroidery thread through here so that it can actually look on your card like it is hanging on there. So we'll take a look at how to do that too. So thank you guys, everybody who has been jumping in, and the die can be used. I think there was a comment that just flashed by that said the die set can be used with other Altenew stamp sets, and that is very true. So we'll take a look at that and some different ways to use both of these elements together. For the other supplies that I'm using, the cards that I did today are quite clean and simple. So they're a very minimalist vibe, or maybe more traditional. I don't know. It depends on how you look at it. But the inks that I use, normally I have like a whole tray full of inks that I use for these. But in this case, I'm only using bamboo, parrot, and moss. So these three, this is going to be for my pine bow. And then I'm also going to bring in the pigment ink. So this is the Enchanted Gold. And we're going to do a little embossing. So I've got my embossing ink pad and Golden Peach embossing powder, one of my all-time favorites. And this just looks great for Christmas cards. So the cards that I want to show you today, and I'll just whiz through these and then I'll tilt down the camera and we'll get right into the crafting part of it. But this is what you can see, my clean and simple, or my minimalist cards that I did for this session. So I'm using the sentiments in all different languages as my background. I've got a bit of vellum on here, and we'll talk a little bit more about why I decided to use that. And then I've got the ornament that's been stamped with that Enchanted Gold, and I've got the sentiment down here. And I think you can see that I've got some thread going through here, and that's just going right through the hole, so it actually looks like it is hanging from the top of the card. So this is what we're going to start out with. And then the branches, I just adore these branches, and I think that they can be used in lots of different ways. And this is great when you can die cut several elements and then kind of group them all together and add your ornament on there. So in this case, I don't even have any of the ornament stamp on here. So instead, I've just got one of the sentiments, which has been embossed. So we'll do a little bit of embossing today too. And in my clean and simple vein, I've got just the branch coming here and then the ornament. But the ornament I've stamped with the Enchanted Gold ink. Now, because it's a pigment ink, you can also use it as an embossing ink. And that's what I've done. So I've got some of the embossing powder on there in areas of it. So it's a little bit of two-tone, but it's also the two-tone on two gold tones. So it gives a little bit of variety, and I really like it. It's quite subtle though. And I've also got some embossing coming through on the branch too. So we'll do, I call it partial embossing, when you're not embossing the entire image, but just little areas of it. And then last but not least, a very, very simple card. This could also be if you do like, if you set the table at Christmas time and you have nameplates or place settings, this I think could also be quite an easy one too. This is really just using that branch and some green and also some of that Enchanted Gold stamped on top of it. So those are the 4 card projects that I want to share with you today. So I'm going to stand up and tilt down the camera and we can get right into the crafting, and we'll start first of all with our vellum layered cards. So thank you to everybody who's popped in while I was chatting away. It's super nice that you have all joined us, and I'm really glad to see everybody. So I'm excited to share this with you. Okay, so hang in there with me while I get this set up, and I think you can see that pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to be using my Misty throughout. You guys know that I love this, and this is my go-to tool for pretty much any stamping that I do these days. I'm going to start out, first of all, with this one. I'm going to start with the ornament on here. And to do this, I'm just going to grab a piece of the smooth white cardstock, pop this down on here. My cardstock's a bit bigger than what I need, but that's okay. And I'll just grab the ornament on here. It's about, let's see, I can measure it. I've got a ruler on hand. So this is about 2 3/4 of an inch across from the widest area. So it makes a really nice focal element on your card. So I'll just pop this down here and close this up. Now for this, I'm going to be using the Enchanted Gold. So this is a pigment ink, which means that it dries a little bit more slowly. It's going to give you a really rich, beautiful color and just such lovely shine. I love these inks from Altenew. And I'll just press this. Now I also like to do a second round, even if it's stamped really well. I like to do a second go just to get a little crisper definition, a little bit more ink laid down on there. And then I've got my ornament. So pretty, so easy to do. And you could stamp this with that beautiful gold and have this be your focal element. You could stamp one of the sentiments down here and you're ready to go. So you can leave it as is, or you can die cut it, which is what I did. So again, with the cutting die, you're able to get, I've got one that's already been die cut, you're able to get that little hole in there, and that's going to make it, just give it another design option. Okay, so I'm going to clean off my stamp here, and I'm just using a little bit of water to do this. And then I'm going to do my background. So the background of my card, again, just using some plain white cardstock here, smooth cardstock. I know for my design that I want my Christmas tree ornament to kind of hang down here. So I don't need to fill the entire background with the sentiments. I'm going to concentrate everything kind of up here. And if you're thinking, well, you know, lots of the words on there, the languages, I don't speak those languages, or I don't know anybody who speaks Welsh or Korean or Chinese for that matter, I think they look beautiful. And I'm a word person, so this might just be me. But I love the different scripts. I just think that the words have a lovely sentiment, but I think they also just look really beautiful. I mean, I certainly don't speak Korean or read it, but just looking at the characters, they're absolutely gorgeous, and they can be used as a design element. So what I'll do is just pull off the liner sheet here, and I'm going to pull some stamps really just based on their length and the type. So let's see, I'll pull off the Korean, make sure that it's reading the right way before I do this, especially with ones that I really cannot read. And then I'm just going to be popping these down. And I'm just kind of filling the space. I'm not too worried about having them completely perfect. Let's see, put this one down here. And I'm just going to be concentrating on filling this bottom portion. So let's grab our Polish sentiment here as well. And maybe one more. Let's see. Okay. I'm working upside down, so I'm hoping I'm getting these down here correctly. Okay. And I think I do have this one around. There we go. Okay, so just to give you an idea of positioning these, I'm just kind of filling this space. I know I'm going to have that ornament right here, so I want to make sure that I'm not going to be covering everything up. And then I'm going to, again, stamp this with that beautiful Enchanted Gold. So I'll close this up. Now, of course, I've got the lines on the front panel here, so this is where I can really go back and sort of scoot things around if I need to, or reposition. But I think we're good for demo purposes. So again, I'll grab that Enchanted Gold and ink this up, and I'm going to do it 2 times as usual, and just position this here and lift, and it's beautiful already. I just love that effect, but let's give it another quick pass on here. There's something about gold ink, I think, that just really works so beautifully for Christmas. Silver too, for that matter, but I think gold just really, really works so beautifully. Okay, so now I've got my piece, and I could have gone up to the top here, but I think, which is actually, now that I look at it, I realize that I've made a mistake. I did want my sentiments to be going up more toward the top. So you know what, let's add a few more just up here to make it look a bit more like what I've done. I'll move these off. Apologies for that. I thought I was going the right way, but that's fine. I'll just add a few more on here. And let's see. Put this down, and we'll add the Afrikaans on here as well. Okay. So we'll pop this here. And there. So I've got a few more sentiments than I planned, but that is fine. And ink it up again. And I do recommend, when you're working with this pigment ink and you want to have a quick drying background, do use a matte cardstock rather than a glossy cardstock. A glossy cardstock will require you to do some heat setting, which is not difficult to do, but if you're working in a hurry, you might want to keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to clean this off and move aside these. And then you can see here. So we've got all of our sentiments on here. And then what you can do is add your Christmas tree ornament on here. Now, what I thought when I was playing with the positioning of this, I kind of thought it seemed like it was almost competing. The elements were competing with one another. So instead, I decided to put a piece of vellum on top. And I think that when you put then the Christmas tree ornament on here, it just kind of mutes the words back a little bit so that it has a bit of a softer effect. So again, I'll show you this without and with. And I think either way is fine. I just found that I really liked having that vellum on there a little bit better. So then what you can do when you're getting set to glue, now one thing that people always wonder about is when you add glue, especially like tape tabs or double-sided tape with vellum, it just doesn't work quite so well. The adhesive will show through pretty easily. So what I like to do is have everything kind of stacked together. And then what I'll do is grab some thread and I'll just pop this through that little hole, pull this back, and then I can secure this. And I've got a little piece of tape that I'm going to secure this with and just tack that down. Now, the thing that I've noticed with a lot of these twines, and this is a fairly narrow twine. It's not really super thick and bumpy. It's actually like a jewelry making cord. So it's nice and sturdy, but it's also pretty lightweight. Once I've got this down here, even though it's not super lumpy, I really find that it works best when I'm adhering these if I use some foam tape. And then that way I don't have lumps and bumps. So I'm just going to use, I've got these little square foam tape tabs. So what I'll do is grab a couple of these, and usually I put in a few more and one in the center. So let me pop this over here, one in the center. Just then that way when I'm putting this down, I don't have the lump of that thread or that twine on there. So then what I can do is start building this. So I've stamped my sentiment on here, and I'm just going to grab a glue stick in this case. Lots of different adhesives that you can use, but I tend to rely on a glue stick when I'm using vellum. So I've got this in place. I've got the vellum on top, but I haven't glued it down. But I can sort of position this and say I'll put this here. and then that I want my ornament to go here. Try and get off some of these little liner tabs. And put this down like so. So now I have my positioning done. I've only got my elements glued onto the vellum now. So then what I can do is just flip this over, and in the areas where I've got elements, this is where I can put more adhesive or a thicker layer of adhesive. So I'm going to put that down on the vellum. On this piece, I'm going to add a little bit of glue just really lightly onto the cardstock itself. When you put the adhesive down, it works best if you put it onto the more absorbent of the papers, unless you're planning on hiding it behind something like I am with this Christmas tree ornament. And then when I do this, and you add a light touch of that glue, and then it won't show through, but you can still have the edges secured. And then what I can do is just take this cord and wrap it around to the front. I've got a little bit more tape here. And then pop that down. And then I've got the front of my card set. And I can just trim off the excess bit on here. And that. And then I can put this onto the front of my card. Now, again, because I've got this lumpy cord on here, and I would definitely, trim this off. But I've also used some foam mounting squares to adhere this onto the front of the card as well. And then just added a little bit of ribbon toward the top of the card. Let me grab this so you can see. So in this case, I've got some ribbon tied up here, but you can see also that I've got that adhered down with some really thin, they're thin, clear, not foam mounting, but slightly less thick than your typical foam mounting squares or your typical foam tape. So that gives a little bit of lift, makes this so it's not all squashed together, and easy peasy. So yeah, the glue stick is my go-to for working with vellum, and definitely, use a light touch. Hide as much of it as you can behind the other elements, but you want to have the corners sticking down too so that they don't get handled or don't come off when they get handled. Okay, so that's our first card. Pretty quick, pretty easy, a nice way to use those sentiments as your background. Now I want to take a look at another way to put that Christmas tree ornament to use, and also we can have a play with some of the branches on here. So in this case, what I've done is die cut just the ornament from plain white cardstock. So no stamping on here yet, but this is the perfect size for the large piece on earth stamp. And that is, I'll show this one to you. I lost the liner sheet for my stamp set, so I just have a piece of white paper behind so you can see. So I'm using this large piece on earth. And I'll pop this down. Again, secure it with some magnets. Now for this one, I want to do some embossing. So I've got my embossing tool at the ready. I also need to have, of course, my embossing ink. Got that ready to go. And my beautiful golden peach embossing powder. And I'm laughing a little bit because I love this embossing powder so much that look how much I have left. I can see the bottom of the jar. This is how much I love it and how much I've used it. The other thing I need to have on hand, of course, is a piece of scrap paper to catch my excess embossing powder so that I can put it right back into the jar and use it again. So let's see, I'm going to position that there and ink it up. And then stamp this. And again, I'm going to do a double stamping on here. I really like that, especially with clear embossing ink, because you can't really tell if you've got everything. until you get the embossing powder on it. So this is a good way just to double check. Okay, so I'll lift this up and then put this into my folded scrap paper. If you hear any rumbling in the background, it is one of my 2 cats who's just come running in, and I'm hoping she will be quiet and have a rest. So she's thumping around a little bit. Okay, so I've got that on there, and you can see how beautiful that detail is. Now, one little trick I like to keep on hand is a toothpick. And this is just a great way to shuffle off any little tiny granules of embossing powder. You can use a small fine tip paintbrush as well, but I find that sometimes those bristles will sort of splay out a little bit, and with a toothpick you can really get into some of those very tight areas just to make sure that you've got all of those off. Okay, so I'm going to put back my precious golden peach embossing powder. And then if you'll hang in with me for a second, I'm just going to heat set this quickly. So excuse the noise, and we'll be ready to go in just a sec. Okay, so now we have our embossed Christmas tree ornament. So simple to do. You could choose any of the sentiments. I think this fits in here perfectly, but of course a lot of the other ones would do as well. So that's all I needed to do for my main accent piece on my card. But let's take a look at some of the branches on here too, because this is a really great part of the set, and one that I just have been using and using. So it's this pine bow right here. Pull this off, and let's ink this up and do some stamping with it. So again, I'll grab another piece of cardstock, and this is where all of my greens are going to come in. So I'm going to be using the 3 green colors. I'm going to start with the lightest color, which is the bamboo. And then I'll be working with the parrot as well, and then add a little bit of detail with moss too. So this is great. This is a great idea for adding some definition to your stamped images, and you can kind of mix and match your inks. So again, I'm going to start with the bamboo, and I'm inking all over the entire branch. So that's with the bamboo. Then I'm going to come back with parrot and just kind of dab in a few places. I'm sort of zigzagging across here. It doesn't have to be too precise. With the moss, I'm going to use kind of the corner of this little cube, and I'm tapping it along the spine, if you will, of the branch. And again, don't worry about it having to be too perfect. When you close this up, you'll be able to see a little bit better. So you can see where the darker color is really going along on the center here and in that area. And then I've got lighter edges on the tips of the pine itself. So this is, and you could go back and add more if you wanted to. You could keep everything on the Misty and have another go, but I think it looks fine and gives you just a little bit of color variation on there. So what I did after I got that kind of planned with all of those is I stamped multiples, and then I die cut them. And this is again great if you're doing batch making on your cards, so that you can get several of your Stamped Elements die cut. So I did this with 3, and then I used them to create kind of an arrangement on my background piece. But before I did that, I wanted to add a little bit of spattering on here. So I'm going to take my moss, which is the darkest color, put a little bit of it onto my craft sheet, and I think you guys have seen me do this before. Add a little puddle of water, and then just mix this up. You can use a water brush like I'm using, or you can use a paintbrush. And then I just hold this over my cardstock and tap this. And of course you can turn this and have it going lots of different directions. And then just let that dry, and you have a really nice and simple background onto which you can start putting some of your pine boughs. So this is where you can just cluster them on here. So I've got 3, an uneven number, as we know, design element wise is always really pleasing. So I just had everything kind of clustered in one corner. You could also, of course, have them coming from the top and in the center, and then add your ornament on top of that. So you can have them as a corner treatment, have them coming from the side or from the top, and then just add that ornament on top. And again, I've used some foam tape for this. So I've got the branches are up on foam tape. This one is not, these 2 are. And then I've got 2 layers underneath the ornament. So I've got my spattering going on here, and I've got some sequins on here as well. Now, I didn't tie the bow through the loop in this case. I just tied a bow with some twine and then glued it on top. And I really like using some of this natural kind of, I think it's a hemp twine, in combination with something that's a little bit more sparkly. I think it also sets off some of the clean and simple lines of this card as well. So I've got 3 of those pine boughs, 1 of the ornament, a little bit of embossing, and some spattering on there. And I think that this is one, if you're making cards in batches, that this is a great one to be able to sort of mass produce. So that is our second card. So really having a fun time with those pine boughs. I really enjoy those. Okay, so the next card I want to show you is this one here. Again, keeping it quite clean and simple. You'll notice I've also got these up on foam tape, and I happen to notice that a lot just because with clean and simple cards, sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of dimension going on there. So that's where the foam tape is coming in handy. So in this case, I'm going to stamp and emboss some parts of the globe, the ornament. So again, I'll bring back in this Misty and my cardstock, and let's see, grab this again and position it down. Now, normally when you're doing heat embossing, you want to work fairly quickly so that the ink doesn't dry before you add your embossing powder on. But in this case, I'm going to work a little bit more slowly. I don't have to rush too much. I'm not using the embossing ink. Instead, I'm going to use the Enchanted Gold, so the pigment ink. So pigment ink can be used for embossing as well. And I'll ink this up and stamp, and then do it again just to get a really crisp line, and ink that up and have a stamp. Now I'll move aside my Misty, and I'm going to bring in that scrap piece of paper here, and then again with the Golden Peach. Now, rather than covering the entire stamped image, I'm just going to kind of tap on a little bit of this in some areas. And I'm not really aiming for any, places in particular. I'm just trying to get a variegated effect. So I think you can see I've just got little puddles on there. And then again, tap back into the jar. I have to save every granule of it since I love it so much. And then I'm going to, once again, just give this a quick heat set. Now, if I find that I've got any areas that I need to kind of tap away on the inside, again, I can use my toothpick for that. But I think we're doing okay. So I'm going to heat set this, and then we'll take a look. Okay, so now I think you can see where I've got two kind of different levels of shine, and I've got some dimension on here, but I love how those warm tones of the enchanted gold and the golden peach, they're different. You can definitely tell that they're different, especially as you're tilting and moving it, but it really does just create a very subtle difference between the two. And I think it adds just a little bit of something extra to the card when you get that done. So again, here's that finished element that I've done. And I did thread through a little bit of gold embroidery thread on here, and that's just positioned on top of this branch. So let's take another look at the branch, because the branch has been stamped and then also with a bit of embossing powder on there. So I'm going to clean this guy off, and then we'll look at how to do that, because that really does kind of coordinate everything together here. So I'll put my ornament to one side and get another piece of cardstock and position these elements down. Now for this one, I'm going to again use that moss ink. I love this ink. This is just such a beautiful color. And I'm inking this up in its entirety. So make sure that that's all covered. And then stamp that and have another go. Okay. So there's my beautiful, that is just so beautiful. It's so detailed and it's just gorgeous. I absolutely love it. I'm going to keep this in place and just clean off the ink from the pine bow. This one, by the way, if you're die cutting, stamping and die cutting multiples of these, you could, of course, arrange them in a wreath shape. So if you like that idea, keep that in mind. So I've got my stamped piece down here. I've got my stamp over here. And now I'm going to go back to my embossing ink and my embossing powder. And for this case, the same way that we did the kind of two-tone or three-tone on the branch, I'm going to do the same kind of thing. Kind of hold this at an edge and just apply a little bit of that ink. And then stamp that down. And I'm not going to worry about doing it twice. So in this case, we're not worried about getting a perfect amount of coverage, just the amount that we want. And sprinkle a little bit of this on there, sparingly. Well, I don't have to be that sparing. Okay, I'll add a little bit more. And I think you can see where that has stuck onto that embossing ink. So I'll just heat set that, and this will take just a couple of seconds, and then we'll see how this looks. Okay, there we go. Very light touch. You can add, of course, as much or as little as you want to on there, but I think when you combine it with the same effect on that Christmas tree ornament, I just think it is still keeps with clean and simple minimalist sort of design, but it has something a little bit extra to it, and I like having that amount of shine on there. And I do think that Christmas time is a perfect time to add just a little touch of shine to it. So then I did die cut out the embossed piece and then glued it, foam taped it onto another white panel. So I've got my blank white card, and then I've also got a white panel which is popped up with a little bit of foam tape as well, the thinner foam tape, again just to give some dimension. This is on foam tape, this is on foam tape, and then a little bow, and then I've got my stamping on here. Now the stamping that I've done here is done with one of my all-time favorite black ink pads, which is the pigment ink. This is the Obsidian. Now do remember, because it is a slower drying ink, that you don't do what I did, which was to touch this while it was still slightly wet. So I can see that there's a little bit of a smudge on there, but just be sure to let that dry before you start adding your elements on there, before you get impatient like I was. So it's a beautiful rich ink, and it does need just an extra minute to dry. You can also, of course, use a heat tool to speed that up if you need to. Okay, oh, I'm going to keep my branch on here because I want to move on to our last card, which is the simplest one, but I really just do love this, and I think that it's something that can be used for, table decorations. It can be used for a card, whatever you would like to do. And in this case, I can move aside this. I'm going to come back with all three of my green colors, and I'm also going to bring in the enchanted gold one more time. So let's pop this down here. And again, I'm going to be working with the three colors from light, medium to dark. So I'll start with my bamboo, move to parrot, and then go to moss in the same way we did before. So just ink this up all the way and then stamp this. It looks pretty just like this, actually. That's with the bamboo. But if I want to add a bit more color, again, I'm going to kind of zigzag around here with the parrot. And this technique, by the way, will work with any of your shades of green. So if you have the frayed leaf, that will also work. Any of those will look great. So as you can see here, I've got a little bit more color on here right away. And then again, coming back with the moss and just working with a corner of that ink pad, or whatever you can, if you've got the larger ones, you can kind of hold it from one of the rounded edges. And then I've got some more dimension on there. And then what I want to do is just dab off any excess ink. And this is why it's also important to work from your lightest to your darkest. Then I'll come back with my enchanted gold. And again, just kind of tap this on. If I have more than I wanted on there, I can also, kind of dab off a little bit. And then I'll close this up. And I think I need a little bit more. I'll pop a little bit more color on there. And then I've got just a bit of golden shine on there. And I think it just looks really soft and pretty. So that's going to give you another dimensional effect. So here we go. It's quite subtle. I know that it's not as much as the embossing on here. So just as a comparison, you can see the two do give you a very different look. I love them both though, and I think they both have their place. So I've accented this with a couple of little gemstones on there, and I used a bit of red twine. Now I think this could also look really pretty. Instead of the twine, you could also use some of that more natural cord on there. That would look really pretty as well. And just stamped the sentiment. Now here's where I'm mixing and matching. So it says wishing you Merry Christmas. So again, you can mix and match some of the sentiments on that stamp set. Okay, you guys, so those are the 4 cards that I wanted to show you. What I'm going to do is stand up and tilt you back up, and then we can take another look at the cards again, and then we will be done with our session together. So hang in there with me while I move this back up. And here we go. Sue, oh, Sue, it's nice to see your name pop in there. Good to see you. I know I've been so busy talking, haven't had a chance to welcome everybody who's jumped in while we've been doing this. So thank you guys for joining us. So we have just a couple more minutes together. Don't forget, if you haven't shared the live video while we're live, now is your chance to do that. And then also be sure to post in the comments below that you shared and how you shared. And then you might be in for that $15 gift certificate. So yeah, adding just a little bit of gold. I agree. I think especially with Christmas cards, it's just nice to have a little bit of gold in there, or silver. You could definitely do that too, but Altenew has such pretty golds that I couldn't resist. So again, going with our background piece here with our multicultural sayings with a bit of vellum. So don't forget that you can add vellum on top. In fact, I've got another piece here. This one is without the vellum on top, and I just think adding that second layer just kind of softens things a little bit. And then our Christmas tree ornament stamped in gold, so is our sentiment, and then our blue twine up here that's going through that little die cut hole at the top of the ornament. Makes it easy. And then we did our embossing on here, and then this is of course just using the ornament by itself. And oh, Cece doesn't want to go to sleep. I know, me too. I always get wound up, want to get more ideas and thinking as I'm talking, like, oh, we could do this, we could do this. So we've got some spattering going on in the background, and we've got the pine boughs on here. I just really like that combination of having something kind of glittery and gold along with something a little bit more natural, more natural material like that twine. And then we've got our double gold embossing and pigment ink, and I hope you guys can see that. It just looks really nice in person how the golden peach, this is the embossing powder, and that enchanted gold pigment ink come together so nicely. And then of course we've also got some gold on our branch there, and our nicely stamped little sentiment on there. I'll be more careful next time. I won't be so impatient as I'm handling my cardstock. And then finally, our very, very simple little pine branch here with our simple sentiment. And I like it especially on that craft cardstock. I think that also adds a little bit to it. Contrasts nicely with the gold metallic. So again, the stamp set that we're using, I've got stamps everywhere on my work area. I'm going to have a bit of cleanup tonight. So this is the Peace on Earth, and we've been using that Christmas tree ornament. We're using this branch a lot, and then of course all of the sentiments on here in lots of different languages, from Swedish, Norwegian to English to Hawaiian, Ukrainian, and so much more. So really do love this. And don't forget, there's the die set that goes along. Hang on, it's got stamps stuck to it. And that will give you the ornament. It will also give you the pine branch. And I know I at first was thinking I could just cut around that. That's no big deal. But then having that little any die cut for you, it just opened up so many other possibilities if you want to thread something through there. Because I don't want to try and cut a little perfect hole in the top of that ornament. So that comes out nicely. And also with the pine bow here, if you wanted to create lots of pine bows like I've done for this card, or if you want to create wreaths, that die cut's going to save you a lot of time and effort. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. Thank you to Lydia for being behind the badge and throwing out all of the links so that people know where to find this. So again, it's the Peace on Earth stamp and die set. Minimal use on the inks tonight, but I'm back on Monday, so I may get back out my big tray of all of my inks, and we'll do something more with that. So hope to see you next week as well. Thanks so much for joining. Don't forget to share if you haven't already, and let us know how that goes. And I hope to see you on Monday. We'll see what we'll be playing with then. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night. And thank you again to Altenew, and thank you to Lydia for being here with us. So take care, you guys, and I will see you again next time.